The portal hits keep on coming. Three more additions for KU football and Lance Leipold, a tight end, former four-star, an edge who was highly recruited, and another receiver for Jalen Daniels to throw to. We break them all down on today's episode.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find us on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, bit of a bonus episode here. KU football, three more transfer portal commits. They're up to, I think, like 15 commits now in the portal class. This has been an awesome class so far. Obviously, KU had a lot of scholarships and opportunities to do that, so you hope that it's more quality than just quantity at the end of the day, but it seems like they're doing a pretty good job to this point in time. And we're going to break down the three newest members: Keyan Burnett, tight end, transfer from Arizona; Caleb Redd, an edge defensive end transfer from Kentucky; and Levi Wentz, a wide receiver transfer from University of Albany. We're going to get into all of their games, the tight end, edge, receiver rooms for KU, and what this means for the 2025 team and moving forward as well. First, though, this episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. So let's talk about Keyan Burnett first. He is a tight end who stands 6'6", 248 pounds. I mean, that's great size right there. Transferring from, it still is weird to me to say transferring from Arizona is transferring within the same conference. But that is the case here. He is going to be transferring, within the same conference here, coming from Arizona. So he's originally from Anaheim, California. He went to Servite High School, which typically is like a really good high school program. And I don't know if there was any previous relationship or knowledge of each other with, him and Jalen Daniels, obviously both being from, Southern California. They're not directly, with each other, but I don't know. Maybe there's some familiarity there. But he was a former top 250 nationally ranked recruit, was a basketball player and a football player. Obviously, you think of that, helping a lot of tight ends, four-star recruit. And so he comes into Arizona, true freshman in 2022. He appears in 9 games. He starts 1 game. Then in 2023, he starts 2 games with 13 appearances. And then 2023, this year in 2024, he has 8 games played. So that'll make him a true senior in 2025. I don't think there's anything you can work with there to make it any less than that. But he went from 6 catches for 44 yards his first 2 seasons combined to having a really solid year this year. 18 catches, 217 yards, and a touchdown. He had 2 games with 5 catches this season. He had another game with 3 catches. All 3 of those games with 3 or more catches came against Big 12 opponents. And again, if he would have ended up playing in all 12 games, those stats would have probably looked even better. You're probably looking at, closer to, 25 catches, 30 catches, somewhere in that range at that point for, maybe 300-ish yards, which would have looked like KU's, leading tight end receiver from a season ago. And he wound up with strong Pro Football Focus grades, 73.9 PFF grade this past season. That was a 71.5 in the receiving game. That was a 76.7 in pass block and a 74.3 in run block. So, you have a guy who's willing to block. You have a guy who's a good athlete, and he has good size. I look at him as being somebody who could, He was good this past season. I think could really break out in the Kansas system and with Jalen Daniels. And, I look back to this past season, and I think in the Jeff Grimes offense, it was a little bit different, the usage of the tight end in the passing game. I think it was a little bit more with Andy Kotelnicki. I think with Jim Zebrowski, it'll probably be somewhere in between, right? Maybe it's not to the level that Andy Kotelnicki liked to use him, but I think it's going to be more than the Jeff Grimes, right? And when you look at it too, obviously KU, we're going to talk about adding Levi Wentz. Right now, maybe you still do have some questions about the receiver room. Maybe it makes sense for KU to have some sets where, they do have 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends on the field, or they are throwing more to the tight ends to kind of make up for that. And if that's going to be the case, okay, I feel a lot better about the tight end room now because you look at it, and Deshaun Hanukkah coming back for another season, he was in line to be your starting tight end a season ago during spring ball. And I think Deshaun Hanukkah can be a good player. But the big question for Deshaun Hanukkah, I don't think is necessarily how good of a player, I guess, was he? It's how good can you expect him to be coming off an Achilles injury, a season-ending Achilles injury? Those things are very difficult to come back from. Now, the good news for him is, I guess time would be on his favor in that case, because if he did get injured in the spring, by the time we get fall of 2025, you're talking about 18 months, right? It's not a guy who suffered the injury in season. But still, a lot of times those guys coming back from those injuries, I know different position, but with quarterback, like Kirk Cousins hasn't looked the same so far this season. That's a really hard injury to come back from. Now, Kirk Cousins, like 35 years old. Deshaun Haneke is like 23, something like that. So it is different. But like basically what I'm saying is if Deshaun Haneke comes back to the guy that he was before the injury, then you have two starting level tight ends, in my opinion, with both these guys in Keyan Burnett and Deshaun Haneke. You'll probably see both of them on the field a lot, and both of them are good receiving tight ends. I think they can be. But if Deshaun Haneke coming back from the injury, it takes him time to reacclimate, or he's not quite as explosive, I still think he'll be a very useful player for KU. But then maybe at that point in time, you expect Keyan Burnett to be the number one and Haneke to be, a guy that you can rotate in as kind of the number two. It still leaves a role like who's going to play that Jared Casey role, that kind of, H-back, fullback type role. Like, would that be a job for Leighton Cure? Would that be what Keyan Burnett can do? What about a Jaden Ham, who will be redshirt sophomore, or Carson Brune, who will be redshirt freshman? What about a Quentin Conley, who has seemingly gotten some good reviews as a former walk-on? I don't know if he still is or has earned a scholarship at this point in time. But Leighton Cure, I think becomes interesting there too. But I feel good about the tight end room now, because I really like Keyan Burnett. And, now it basically puts less pressure on the Deshaun Haneke thing coming back from the injury, right? That was going to be a lot of pressure on a guy coming off an Achilles injury. Now you're like, oh, we have two starting level tight ends. And I think Leighton Cure after a year in the program, because he was coming off, a season-ending injury the year before. So I think it's good to expect Leighton Cure to take a big jump this year too. That I feel pretty good about the tight end room. And that's even before if there are any jumps from the young guys with Jaden Ham and Carson Brune. Okay, let's get to our next player, which is Caleb Redd, and then we'll get to Levi Wentz from Albany as well. This is Locked On Jayhawks. And this episode of the show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did you know Rocket Money can help you find any subscriptions that you might have forgot about or that you were paying for twice? It happens to a lot of people, and you might have some subscriptions that you didn't even realize you're still paying for. Rocket Money makes it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances right on your phone. They have their personal finance app, helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on. rocketmoney.com/locked on. This episode of the show is also brought to you by Game Time, where you can go if you want to get tickets for the KU Brown game on Sunday. Obviously, students are going to be past finals week. Like, you're going to have an easier time getting a ticket to the KU Brown game. It's during the holiday season, and Game Time is going to help you with, maybe you have some people coming out and you're like, hey, I need something to do because my family members are bothering me. Where can we go that is going to not have my, cousin yapping at me the whole time? Well, togetherness. That's important during the holiday season. You can be together at a KU game. Get your tickets on Game Time, which has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. They have the seat views, so you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you even buy them. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Thank you for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. And don't forget, we do have a preview for that KU Brown game, which is coming on Sunday. We'll release that on Friday, so make sure to check that out if you haven't already and get you ready for KU's final non-conference game before the start of Big 12 play. All right, our next transfer pickup for KU was Caleb Redd, who is going to legally change his last name to Caleb Crimson, but there will be an extra, I don't know, there's that. This is a stupid joke. I don't know why I'm continuing with this. Nonetheless, Caleb Red, he is going from UK to KU, Kentucky to Kansas. He's a 6'3", 232-pound edge. The reason I say edge here is because for Kentucky, they're playing a 3-4. And so he was playing outside linebacker for them. For Kansas, you're playing 4-down lineman, so he becomes a defensive end. So basically, he's just on the edge. 6'3", 232, though, probably looking at more of a weak side defensive end. So, this is something we kind of talked about. Definitely feels like they have more guys in the running for that weak side defensive end spot than the strong side. Now, maybe with another offseason, like there's a player or two that can add more weight or can morph into that strong side defensive end because you lost your top two with Jeremy Robinson and Dylan Woodkey from this past season. But in terms of Red, he's originally from St. Louis. He went to DeSmet High School, and he was an 87 graded 3-star recruit who was ranked top 20 in the state of Missouri. He was ranked top 850 nationally overall. He had 13 sacks in his senior season of high school. So I think it'll be good that he gets to play D-end at KU. I found this kind of interesting on his Kentucky profile. It mentions that after football, he wants to be a YouTuber. So, Caleb, come on the show. Join us on YouTube here where you can watch Locked On Jayhawks. But he wound up redshirting in his lone season in Lexington. Ended up playing 2 games. He had a tackle against Ohio in 4 snaps. Good Ohio team. And then he played 8 snaps against Murray State, So not really much you can take away from the freshman season. He's going to be a redshirt freshman, 4 seasons left to play for Kansas in 2025. So that's been a really common theme from KU so far in this transfer portal class. It feels like they're really aiming for guys with multiple years, and not just multiple. I mean, especially you think about the guys on the line of scrimmage. You've gotten a lot of guys with 3-4 years left under their belt, and I think that's a really smart thing from Lance Leipold and company. I mean, it just is in general if you can get them, into your system a little bit more. But also, when you think about it, obviously there was a mass departure of a lot of talent from the 2024 squad before we get to the 2025 squad. You're going to still be losing even some more key pieces after 2025, right? I mean, you think like Jalen Daniels and LaShawn Williams and Levi Wentz, I guess, who you added, who we'll talk about in a bit here, like Doug Emelian, both those top 2 tight ends we just talked about with Keyan Burnett and Deshaun Hanukkah. Bryce Foster decided to come back. Kobe Baines. On the defensive side, like Dean Miller, although that one could get weird because this whole JUCO thing, which we'll talk about at another day. But I think 4 of your top 5 defensive tackles, both your linebackers that you added with Kamara and Jason Gilliam. I could go on and on and on. There's more seniors on the roster. There's going to be a bunch more players that leave after this season too. So the fact that you're getting in transfer portal players now that can both help you this year and can add to your future seasons is crucial and a really smart job by what KU is doing right now. But anyway, when you look at the defensive end room, what I find interesting is I profile a lot of these defensive ends more as the weak side kind of defensive end, which you think of as more like the pass rushing defensive end. And obviously both are, but the strong defensive end is more of, you think of the run stopping guy, right? More of the powerful guy, a little bit more weight to him. And so right now you look at it and KU has, let's see, seven defensive ends on the roster. You're looking at the 2 incoming freshmen, Adrian Hawley and Garrett Martin. Either one of those could end up being a strong defensive end. Maybe one is weak side, maybe one is strong, maybe whatever. But either way, whatever path either of those go, you're probably not wanting to get them on the field right away as true freshmen. It's very difficult to do on the line of scrimmage, right? We even saw as difficult it was for DJ Warner, who was an incredibly highly rated recruit, right? So even if they are both in that position, it's not to a level of oh yeah, but they're going to be playing 30 snaps every game. If that does end up happening, that's, I guess, either a bad thing that some other stuff ended up in bad injuries or whatever, or that's a great thing because they were just so good that you couldn't keep them off the field. But it's not expected. So then I look at it and it's okay, Dean Miller is, all throughout his career, it's been add weight, and he did a good job adding weight, from last year to the year before. But I think the idea is he is the weak side defensive end. He is the starter there. He's going to continue doing that. Dak Brinkley, he's been looking to add weight. And so I think he's more of the weak side defensive end too. With Caleb Red at 232 pounds, is that a guy you could add 20 pounds to? But even then, I don't know. I think ideally you want your strong side defensive end around like the lightest 250. You probably want him at least 260, right? So I think Red profiles more as being the weak side defensive end, and in some ways is kind of a replacement on your depth chart for what DJ Warner was, which was more of a weak side defensive end, right? The two guys that maybe you have questions about here, one of them for me is Dylan Brooks. Could Dylan Brooks be a strong side defensive end? Now, he is coming off a season-ending injury as well, and so it's like, what can you fully expect from him coming back this season, right? Former highly recruited guy. He hasn't really shown it on the field, and obviously that wasn't, his fault this year getting the injury, but he came into last year 240 pounds. So coming off rehabbing a season-long injury, is he all of a sudden going to balloon up to 260? Probably not. So that leaves one guy for me that I view as being like, okay, I don't know that I viewed you this season as a strong defensive end. I just viewed him as kind of a defensive end that could maybe play either, but it would be By Job. By Job is 240 pounds. At least that's what he's listed by KU. But I could have sworn on his, recruiting profile when KU landed him last year from Michigan State that he was listed a little bit more, that he was in like the mid 240s or 250, 252, somewhere in that range. He's somebody who I look at and being like, okay, that dude's strong. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if he could end up getting up to 255 or 260 with chiseled muscle and be that position. But point being, that means there's a lot of competition for the weak side defensive end. So like, I think Caleb Red will have an impact on the program. And the question just becomes, will it be this year? Will it be in 2020? When I say this year, 2025, or will it be 2026? Right? Because you could easily look at it and say, oh, well, Dean Miller's just going to eat up a majority of the snaps at the weak side defensive end this year. And then after he graduates come 2026, then the full competition to start is on between Dak Brinkley and Caleb Red, right? Like, that could be a very real thing. But part of it depends too, like who is going to be the strong defensive end and how does that kind of competition work out. It also tells you that KU needs to add another defensive end in the portal, but one that would fit that specific position, I think, a little bit more. But clearly, defensive line, defensive end is a position you're going to rotate guys. So even if you look at it this year and go, okay, well, Caleb Red this year is your second string defensive end or your third string defensive end. He's still going to get in games. He's still going to rotate. He's still going to play. And then the other part of it, as I just kind of mentioned with Dean Miller, is there was this whole JUCO thing with Diego Pavia. If he sues the NCAA for more eligibility too and gets his JUCO years back, then he could be around even longer. And then maybe it backs things up with those young guys. So that could get complicated. But again, that's discussion for another episode. All right, let's finish up. KU has a new receiver to throw to from Jalen Daniels. We'll talk about Levi, not related to Carson Wentz. This episode of the show is brought to you by the College Football Playoff on TNT. It's that time of the year where the College Football Playoff is so back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, by the way, awesome. We're seeing these games at home. Good to see that environment. Notre Dame, sweet. And it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you the all hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st. If you're listening to this, it's today. Well, as long as you're listening on the day it came out. Starting with the College Football Playoff Kickoff Show presented by AT&T, 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central Time, leading into the first matchup, SMU Mustangs, Penn State Nittany Lions at 11 Central Time. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 3 Central Time. That's 3 p.m. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate, live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Finishing things up on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks with KU's newest receiver commit, Levi Wentz, who is 6'2", 205-pound receiver, originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And he, very interesting story. He was more of a basketball player in high school and ended up joining the football team his senior year of high school and goes to Old Dominion straight out of high school as a defensive back. Eventually converts to receiver. So like, this is a guy who hasn't been playing football a ton. And I've seen some people kind of being like, it feels like KU is missing out on a lot of their receiver targets, which there might be a little bit of truth to that. That might be a little down on this because you're getting a kid from, a lower level at FCS that the stats are solid, but they don't jump off the page. It's not 1,000-yard receiver or something like that are worried about what the receiver group's going to be. I'll be honest. I really like Levi Wentz. I am very high on what you could get here. And that's part of it. The idea that you have a guy who's very raw, even though he is a more older, experienced player. And what that tells me is that there is a higher ceiling you can get him to if you can take him to that next level, whether it's, Jalen Daniels, whether it's the coaching staff. that I trust this coaching staff to get the very best out of him. And I think that's going to be a good mix. And so you look at it, he started his career at Old Dominion in the Sun Belt. Then he goes to Albany. He's going to be a fifth-year senior in 2025 with 1 year for Kansas. Like I said, like that's a cool combination to have, that you have an experienced player that also has room to grow. Sometimes you have experienced players who it's like, okay, we know what they are, right? For better or for worse, we know what they are. I don't think that's the case here with Levi Wentz because he hasn't been playing football for really that long. So he redshirted at Old Dominion in 2021. He had 3 games played with 1 catch in 2022 at Old Dominion again. Then he transfers to Albany at the FCS level, and he appeared in 8 games in the 2023 season, which was his first year there. Then this past season was his best year. He goes out this year and he has over 600 yards receiving. He had, I guess in 2023, it was 16 catches for 245 and a score, 40 catches this season, and that was in 11 games. That good for 621 yards and a touchdown. I am a little weirded out that he only had 1 touchdown because he's a bigger body receiver who you see some of those basketball skills at times where like he wins jump balls and he's got good size at 6'2", over 200 pounds, that part of you is like, wait, how did you only get this guy, 1 touchdown? Was that just like misusage by the coaching staff? I don't know. Maybe it's good to point out that like their main quarterback had 10 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, and they basically played 3 different quarterbacks. So like it clearly wasn't the best quarterback situation for Albany. So like if you look at it from that perspective, I think everything becomes a little bit more impressive, right? I mean, again, if I'm looking at the total passing yards for Albany, it is oh gosh, this just says passing yards per game. Oh, there we go. 2,700 passing yards as a team. So like 600 receiving yards. If you're in an air raid offense that has 4,000 passing yards, again, that doesn't seem overly impressive. But when it's 2,700, now you have a little less than a fourth of the team's receiving yards. So like that would equate out, if you had a 4,000 yard passer, you'd have 1,000 yard season, so that becomes a little bit more impressive when you take that into account too. But he had 3 100 or more yard games this season, so he was able to go off in some games. He does have some kick return, punt return stats from 2023 as well. I don't know that KU will use him in that way, but as far as the PFF grades go, he had just a 55 Pro Football Focus grade in 2023. That's not great, 378 snaps, but he showed a lot of improvement from year 1 to year 2 at Albany. He went up to a 69.3 Pro Football Focus grade. That's a very solid number. Anytime you're getting to those 70s or aboves, which he's right on the heels of, that's impressive stuff. And when you look at why it wasn't up to a 70, he actually, in the receiving game, had a 72.4 grade. So for that specifically, it was good. The reason it got knocked down a little bit, he only had a 52.5 in run blocking. So that'll be something that he'll have to do better at KU, and he'll have to do better if he wants to get on the field, because KU very much prioritizes it, but also because KU prioritizes it and coaches it up, I'd imagine that number is going to go up in his time at Lawrence. He did play against West Virginia this season. He had 2 catches for 58 yards. He had a 49-yarder, 65.5 PFF grade. So he was solid in a game against a team that you just played this past season, right? What I find interesting is, I mentioned this with Cam Pickett, who was the other transfer portal recruit you got. You got him from Ball State, and he's a player who's really good yard after catch, really good with the ball in his hands. He kind of becomes your like Trevor Wilson replacement, like not in terms of, I think, production. I think it's different, because if Trevor Wilson would have been on a team this year where hypothetically one of Quentin Skinner, LJ Arnold, and Luke Grimm would have left the season before, Trevor Wilson gets more playing time. And that's how I view it with Cam Pickett. Cam Pickett is kind of a Trevor Wilson replacement in terms of his play style, what he's good at, but on a team this year that has more opportunity for if Trevor Wilson was on it, if that kind of makes sense. Then I look at Doug Emelian as being kind of the Luke Grimm replacement. I'm just talking like style of play, not necessarily production here, right? Being your kind of slot receiver who's going to be a good route runner and dependable, right? Then when you look at it here with Levi Wentz, I think you watch some highlights of him making jump ball catches, making deep ball catches, and you can see a little bit of a Quentin Skinner replacement. But when you look at actually some of the numbers, I think this is more of an LJ Arnold replacement, because you look at it, and on Pro Football Focus, he did his best work. He had his best production between the numbers, 10 to 20 yards down the field. And that's where LJ Arnold, especially in the 2023 season, was at his best, was those intermediate routes, those deep crossing routes, those routes over the middle, 10 to 20 yards down the field that he was able to get the ball in his hands and get open and make yards after catch from there. That is an area where Wentz excelled at this season. And so I think from that perspective, also 6'2", bigger body receiver, not as big as a Skinner, but big like an Arnold. I view him as being that kind of replacement in that way to just in terms of, again, like kind of style of play. So the question is, can you find somebody who replaces that kind of Skinner level of play or can kind of, blow the top off the defense? That'll be a big question for KU. Is there somebody already on the roster that, is going to take a big jump up that we don't know about, or one of the freshmen coming in with, like a Jaden Nickens or a Bryson Hayes who can really fly from Mays or like is, I just don't really know enough about Keaton Kubeka's game, honestly. Like, what type of receiver is he, right? And what is he going to provide? But I actually really like this edition. And I know some people might be, I don't know. Again, like I said, I think some people, it's not that they don't like the addition. It's that they feel a little underwhelmed by what has happened at the receiver position. And it does feel like, yes, they have been lacking in the recruiting level from the receiver position. But I do like this addition. For KU. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. And we will be back sometime, breaking news or later next week. You'll find us right here with Locked On Jayhawks.